County News, where the news is cruising and the newscasters aren't texting. With Nick Marquez
and Zaira Livier. It's Tuesday, April 18th, and we're coming to you live from the Creative Tucson studio in downtown Tucson. First, let's talk local headlines.
An Arizona court rejected a lawsuit that challenged an EPA decision to impose standards on industrial sites in the state. The court ruled that the standards were necessary to ensure visibility in federal parks. The rule was part of the Clean Air Act, which aimed at reducing haze in federal parks and forests, and mandates that the state submits a plan to meet those goals. If the state's plan wasn't satisfactory, then the rules mandated that the EPA could set their own standards, which is the part that was challenged by the state's industry. In 2011, the EPA rejected the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality's plan and imposed their own regulations. State manufacturers claimed that the EPA standards were, quote, arbitrary and capricious. However, the court found that the EPA was not operating outside of its bounds and rejected the arbitrary and capricious argument. An official from ADEQ said they were disappointed by the ruling and said that the EPA standards would not result in increased visibility. Cal Portland, a building materials company that was part of the plaintiff team, said that the EPA used incorrect modeling and overstated the company's impact on park visibility. In a statement, Cal Portland said that the rule would cost the company $10 million over 10 years without significantly improving visibility. But environmental groups such as the Sierra Club praised the decision and claimed that manufacturers regularly overestimate the cost of compliance. A spokesman for the Sierra Club said that even if the 10 million number was true, this wasn't an egregious amount for a company of Cal Portland's size. But Cal Portland says that nothing is more majestic than looking up into the night sky and seeing a thick haze of industrial mist in the air.
A group from Tucson's South Side is planning to launch a legal action against the city for what they say are health defects caused by contaminated groundwater. The case is being led by Linda Robles, a Southside resident who lost her daughter to lupus and who has 2 other children who have contracted the disease. Robles also has another daughter and a grandson born with a cleft lip, and her husband was diagnosed with a cancerous kidney tumor last year. She says that the contaminated water caused these ailments along with other similar effects in the south side of Tucson, where Robles has lived for the past 55 years. This isn't the first time that contaminated groundwater claims have been made. Since the early 80s, groundwater in the south side has been known to include cancer-causing TCE. In the 90s, 2 groups of lawsuits alleged that TCE in the area's drinking water led to illness among residents, including cancer, lupus, central nervous disorders, and birth defects. In those cases, residents won financial settlements from Hughes Aircraft and other parties who were held liable for dumping TCE in the ground since the 1940s. This time, the groups were targeting the ground called 1,4-dioxane, which is used as an industrial solvent in the airport area. It was also found to exist in the area's groundwater in 2002, but efforts to remove the chemical from the water didn't start until 2014. Robles spoke last Monday at a community meeting in the South Side where she brought along Richard Gonzalez, an attorney who has already won over $100 million in various TCE settlements. Gonzalez will be offering legal help to Robles and others working on the case, although he isn't planning to formally represent them. Robles says that her plan is to sue Raytheon Missile Systems, who merged with the Hughes in the late 90s. But the case will be tough because residents will have to prove that dioxane caused their illnesses. They also have to prove that they have been drinking contaminated water in recent years. The city claims that Southside residents have not been drinking contaminated water since the 1980s when the TCE was removed. Robles, however, does not believe the city's claims, but she will be going up against a defense giant who is one of the largest employers in Tucson. Not an easy task. Raytheon says that if South Tucson residents back off of the lawsuit, they'll provide every household with their own Tomahawk missile.
The Arizona Speaker of the House is preparing to reintroduce legislation that would ban texting and other cell phone use for teen drivers. Speaker J.D. Mesnard brought back the legislation the day after the resignation of Representative Phil Lovis, who is leaving to take a position in the Trump administration. Lovis repeatedly blocked the legislation from being voted on, but now with Mesdard taking his spot as chairman of the Rule Committee, it looks like the bill would get a vote. If the legislation passes, then the ban would impact teen drivers with a learner's permit or those who have been driving for less than 6 months. While some municipalities, such as Tucson and Marana, have imposed their own texting and driving bans, Arizona is one of only 4 states that does not have a statewide ban on the practice. Supporters say that it's a common sense rule to make the roads more safe, especially for those who are just learning how to drive. Opponents say that texting and driving is important for teens because it teaches them how car insurance works after they crash their car.
Recently introduced legislation would make it easier to obtain a liquor license in Arizona. House Bill 2337 proposes a series of changes to the state's liquor laws. These include allowing craft breweries, distilleries, and farm wineries to share a liquor license, which means that multiple producers could sell beer, wine, and liquor inside the same building or share patio space. Also, the bill would allow more Series 7 beer and wine licenses, which means breweries, bars, and wineries could sell beer or wine to go. This would include letting more breweries to sell more growlers to their customers. The bill would also permit craft distilleries to deliver spirits to licensed areas next to the distiller or to remote tasting rooms, while also allowing craft distillers to operate 2 tasting rooms and retail premises. Current law allows only 1 per distiller. And finally, the bill would give additional access to festival and special events in the state. So far, the bill was given final approval by the House and now heads to Governor Ducey's desk. Craft breweries and distillers have exploded in the last few years, with some gaining national recognition. Camila Alarcon, a lobbyist for the Arizona Craft Brewers Guild, said the law would grow the burgeoning beer, wine, and spirit industries in Arizona and allow them to keep up with trends. While it is unclear whether Ducey will sign the bill, alcohol manufacturers plan to loosen up with a few cocktails.
The Phoenix metro area has been one of the areas hit hardest with extreme poverty, according to a recent report. The report, by MSN, found that Phoenix was hit second hardest in the country by extreme poverty, with 14.6% of the population living in poverty in 2015. This is compared to 12.4% who lived in poverty in 2009. When the study was focused on Phoenix, Scottsdale, and Mesa, the poverty rate jumped to 17%. Tucson came in 9th in terms of poverty growth, according to the study. Bakersfield, California, was the worst hit by extreme poverty in the country. Nationally, the number of high-poverty neighborhoods in the U.S. rose from 1,900 in 2009 to 2,700 in 2015. Governor Doug Ducey said he will help decrease the number of poor people in the state by lowering the poverty rate to make the numbers look better.
And I wanted to take a moment to talk about the program you're watching right now. Here at 5 on 20, we are undertaking a new kind of citizen journalism. We are going to give you the news as we see it, and we want more people to speak up with us. We need writers, hosts, anchors, camera people, sound people, the whole gamut. The times require a new way of informing ourselves, so join us. Do it now. Email us at info@creativetucson.org to get involved, and if you think there's a story we're missing, a person we should interview, an upcoming event that we should cover, or have any tips for us, shoot us an email at creativetucson.org. So don't be strangers.
Now in national and international news. Donald Trump is claiming presidential immunity in a case that charges the president with inciting a riot, a phrase that should be surprising, but isn't at all. The case involves a Trump rally from March of 2016 in Kentucky where 3 protesters were roughed up. The protesters claimed that Trump egged on the crowd by yelling, "Get him out of here," which was caught on video. Trump's lawyers say that he was speaking to security and not the crowd, but the federal judge handling the case has already said that it's conceivable that Trump incited the riot and allowed the lawsuit to move forward. In his defense statement, Trump's lawyers claim that the president had a right to remove protesters, that the president has immunity, and, most oddly, that the protesters' claims are, quote, barred by their unclean hands. Lawyers used the case of Clinton versus Jones, which involved Bill Clinton and Paula Jones, who accused Clinton of sexual harassment. However, legal experts were puzzled as to why Trump's lawyers referenced this case, because judges actually decided that Clinton could be charged with a crime despite being president. So essentially, Trump's lawyers are arguing against their case, the type of incompetence we've come to expect from the Trump team. However, two other cases involving Presidents Richard Nixon and Andrew Johnson ruled that presidents have immunity when they are in office. However, Trump's actions occurred before he became president, so legal experts say that he doesn't have a precedent to get immunity. In another twist, one of the people accused of roughing up the protesters says that Trump is indeed responsible for the riot. Matthew Heimbach, who is a leader of the white nationalist group the Traditionalist Youth Network, claimed in a court filing that he was incited by Trump. In the filing, Heimbach said he, quote, acted pursuant to the directives and requests of Donald J. Trump. Sure, Heimbach is probably just trying to deflect blame for beating up the protesters, but it's hilarious to see the alt-right turning on Trump once the stakes are raised. In related news, karma is still alive and well.
A new report by the Washington Post shows that immigrant arrests have increased during the first few months of the Trump presidency. According to the report, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, arrested 21,362 from January to mid-March. This represented a 32.6% increase over the same period last year. However, in 2014, there were over 29,000 immigration arrests, higher than under Trump. He'll have to try harder. But the report also showed the biggest increase came from arrests of those without criminal records. About 3/4 of the total immigration arrests this year involved individuals with no criminal history. Over the 5,000 immigrants were arrested who had no records, which doubles the number from a year ago. While the news isn't too surprising, it gives some hard data behind the claims. Next week, the Post will release a report showing why it's unhealthy to be struck with a 2x4 multiple times in the face.
The travel industry is claiming that the infamous Trump slump is really happening, as the number of tourists coming to the U.S. has decreased. One study by Tourism Economics forecasted a decline of 10.6 million people this year and next year, which would cost over $18 billion in lost tourism revenue and 107,000 jobs. This would represent a 7% drop in tourism, according to the study. This is mainly due to declining travel among Mexicans and Canadians, who are uneasy about coming to the country since the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Tourism experts are also afraid that they'll see a decrease in visitors from the UK and Europe. Adam Sachs, president of Tourism Economics, says that the 90-day travel ban imposed against 6 Muslim-majority countries contributed to the drop. Sachs says that while the policy doesn't affect most travelers, the, quote, rhetoric around it has damaged the U.S. brand as a destination. He said that it takes very little for people to shift their travel plans to another country, and it appears that it's already happened for many prospective travelers. It's not only for travel pleasure that will be impacted, but also business travel, according to Mike McCormick of Global Business Travel Association. McCormick says that almost half of business travel managers are expecting to cut back on meetings and conferences in the U.S. He says that managers fear that they won't be let into the country due to the uncertainty over Trump's policies. One group that's already scaling back is the Toronto school system, who has canceled all upcoming school trips to the U.S. The decision was made after other school trips were refused at the border. In response, the Trump administration may expand the travel ban to include Canadian schoolchildren, who they say must have something to hide.
Gaza's only power plant has ran out of fuel, leaving 2 million residents with only 4 hours of electricity per day. The UN warned that the situation could potentially make the Palestinian enclave, quote, unlivable. The two governing bodies in Palestine, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, blame each other for the shortage. The PA says that Hamas doesn't know how to manage the power plant and squander the funding that was supposed to go towards keeping the lights on. But Hamas say that it can't afford to buy more fuel for the plant because of taxes imposed by the PA. Gaza has experienced electricity shortages earlier this year, which caused wide-scale protests in January. This led to Qatar and Turkey agreeing to provide 3 months of fuel for the power plant, which is enough for 6 to 12 hours of electricity per day. On Sunday, the supply was emptied, and now Gaza will have to rely on electricity access imported from Israel and Egypt, which only meets about a third of demand. The Gaza Ministry of Health warned of a potential health crisis and the possibility of delayed or canceled surgeries if an agreement was enforced within 48 hours. Dr. Ashraf Al-Qadra from the ministry said that between 200 to 250 surgeries would need to be canceled in this scenario. The deputy chairman of Gaza's Power Authority accused the PA of creating an electricity crisis in order to gain power over the territory. Hamas and the PA have been sharing governmental duties after Hamas was elected in 2008. The U.S. opposed the election because Hamas is considered a terrorist group. So an agreement was made that the PA would take control of the West Bank while Hamas controls Gaza. Gaza is already suffering from soaring unemployment and a lack of drinkable water. The Director General of the PA's Petroleum Authority said that Hamas was manufacturing the crisis rather than the other way around. He said that there were no electricity shortages 10 years ago and that Hamas was unable to manage the Gaza Strip. Regardless of who is to blame, Roger Piper, a UN special coordinator in the area, said that Gaza is reaching a tipping point. He said that much of Gaza's problems are due to sea blockades and restrictions on goods into the territory. The border to Egypt is also closed most of the time, opening only rarely for short periods. Last week, Prime Minister Hamadallah of the PA demanded that Hamas give up power to the government body. He said that once they agreed to give up power, then their salaries would be reimbursed and the electricity shortage would end. A PA delegation will head to Gaza next week to attempt an agreement among Gaza and the West Bank. They will present their peace plan, which they call Join Us or Die.
The state of Oklahoma has ended a system of tax credits to spur wind power in the state. Governor Mary Fallin signed the bill yesterday that would eliminate the tax credits starting on July 1st. The credit was originally supposed to be phased out in 2021. Fallin said that while the wind power industry saw tremendous growth due to the program, the state's budget needed to be tightened. Wind power provides about a quarter of the state's electricity and has made Oklahoma number 3 in wind power generation, with almost 7,000 megawatts. The tax credit originally cost the state $3.7 million in 2010, but the industry's expansion meant that the credits ballooned to $113 million by 2014. Tax credits will remain for other alternative energy projects like solar and geothermal in Oklahoma. However, most alternative energy production in the state comes from wind. Governor Fallin has also proposed issuing windbreaker jackets to everyone in the state to help residents forget about the presence of wind.
Up to 2,000 U.S. troops were deployed to Somalia yesterday to aid Somalian forces against Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-linked extremist group. According to a spokesman for the African Command, the soldiers were conduct quote, security force assistance, which was first reported by Voice of America. Riho wouldn't discuss what this security force assistance includes, nor exactly how many troops would be deployed or any potential future activities. So we can assume these troops will be out of the country by the end of the month and that Somalia's problems will be fixed. Somalia is suffering from over 3 decades of civil war and has a weak central government that's propped up 22,000-member African Union peacekeeping force. Al-Shabaab has also huge amounts of territory since 2011, when they were at their peak. However, they still deliver attacks in the capital and in the countryside. As to why we're deciding to send troops now, your guess is as good as ours. The last time the U.S. launched a major operation in Somalia in 1993, it resulted in the infamous Black Hawk Down incident, where 2 Black Hawk helicopters were shot down, resulting in the deaths of 18 U.S. soldiers. If nothing else, Maybe this operation will result in another Ridley Scott blockbuster, or it will result in more Somalians wanting to come to the U.S. to plot revenge. But if the movie is good enough, we'll forget about the whole thing anyway.
The director of the Office of Government Ethics is asking for help from the House Oversight Committee because he's handling too many ethics violations by the Trump administration. The director, Walter Schaub Jr., said that his agency is too small to handle all of the ethics complaints and conflicts of interest that are inundating his office. His agency only has advisory power and cannot launch investigations into the complaints. He's calling on House Oversight Committee Chairman Jason Chaffetz to investigate, which is like asking Trump to release his tax returns. Spoiler alert, he probably won't. Schaub said that Chaffetz has, quote, authority to investigate these things and compel responses. Unfortunately, no one was able to compel a comment from Chaffetz, who declined to respond to Schaub's comments. This comes less than a week after ProPublica released a report detailing the Trump administration's hiring of several lobbyists to its team. According to the report, many of these lobbyists were granted waivers, which were never posted on the government ethics website, as they're supposed to be. While Chaffetz has been unresponsive, Schaub's office has been getting hammered with ethics complaints from the public. From October 2016 to March 2017, the agency received over 39,000 complaints, an increase of over 5,000% from the same period of the Obama presidency. Yes, over 5,000%. You have to hand it to Trump. He's got so many sketchy ethics concerns and conflicts of interest that he's overwhelmed the office that investigates these issues. Trump reportedly told Vice President Mike Pence that he's got the best ethics violations and that he's still thinking about shooting that guy in the street, just to see what happens. This was Nick Marquez.
And Zaira Livier for 5 on 20 News. Next up, Joe Foster interviews the organizer of the Nasty Women's Art Exhibit. All of the proceeds from the event went to Planned Parenthood. That should have went up with it.
I'm from Russia. I lived in Alaska for a long time. I moved down here 3 years ago. In November, a group of women in New York, in Manhattan, who were artists, said, after the election, they said, what can we do? What can we do to bring attention to the things that are happening in the White House, or will happen in the White House in the future, that are really detrimental to gender equality, to women's health, to women's rights, to freedom of reproduction? And so they said, here's what we will do as Nasty Women. They got a bunch of other artists together and asked for people to submit pieces all over. And in Manhattan, they raised, in a single weekend, $40,000 for Planned Parenthood by just selling donated art like this. So I thought, why can't we do this here? I work in biotech. I'm not a self-proclaimed artist, although I have a lot of pieces in this show that are maybe politically charged, religiously affiliated. I thought Tucson can do this too. We're no New York, we're no Amsterdam, we're no Brussels or Manhattan or Seattle or Dallas or all these other places that have hosted a show. Sydney did one, Phoenix did one, and they raised $20K in 2 weekends. I thought Tucson has a lot going for it in terms of artist community and impassioned people who feel that women's equality is important to them, or who feel that reproductive freedom and deciding when you want to have a family and not by accident is also important. So I called the women in Manhattan and I said, can you help me? And they said, yeah, sure, here's our graphics folder, go do it. I was like, oh, all right, I guess I'm putting on an art show now. So here it is. 2.8 thousand people said that they were interested in coming over the entire weekend. We had, I don't know how many hundreds have cycled in the last couple hours. We had 600 saying they were going to attend and bring a friend, so that's double. I think we're going to raise a lot of money for Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, it's a crazy turnout. I mean, are you surprised at the turnout?
Yeah, I am. I really am. Yeah, I'm super pumped, and I'm also pumped that no protesters showed up.
Yeah, it seems super like everyone's kind of on the same page here.
Yeah,
Which
which I'm really happy about.
it's nice to see that's in Arizona because people think of Arizona as being, conservative state
And it is a conservative state. And I think that has a lot to do with the people that moved to Arizona. A lot of retirees, a lot of military people. That's more of a conservative population in some ways. But I think that you don't have to be conservative or liberal to say women's health is important and access for low-income women to those healthcare services is also important.
Yeah, it shouldn't be, at least, I mean,
Yeah. I don't think it should be an issue, but it is, and boy, is it a big one, it seems, for a number of different reasons.
Yeah. Have you gotten any pushback, like on Facebook or anything?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Anybody? Yeah.
I've had a lot of hate mail, a lot of explicatives of what I should do with other men's genitalia, and how Planned Parenthood is killing babies, and really I think that those types of people are more misinformed than anything else. A lot of people think of Planned Parenthood and they think of abortions, which they do. Only 3% of their money goes to abortions. 97% goes to other services such as cancer screenings, preventative health, prenatal health, to regular income and low-income women and women without health insurance. I went to them when I was in high school and was totally indigent. I went to them when I was in college. I went to them a few years ago. I will always support Planned Parenthood, and they're the reason that I'm healthy now and that I can plan a family whenever I want to. And I think that that is an option that everybody should have.
Yeah. Do you think it's something bigger that they're going after Planned Parenthood? I mean, besides the abortion thing? Or?
Sure. I think that it doesn't have to do, I don't think the controversy is with abortions per se. I think that's the issue that gets a lot of attention. I think the bigger overarching controversy with women's health is if someone controls reproduction, they control the population. So if older white men in the White House control the reproduction of the population, then they can also control a lot of other things. So I think Planned Parenthood stands in the face of that control that other groups who have been in power and would like to stay in power currently have.
Yeah, I agree. I've noticed that trend of kind of like being uneasy about females asserting more control over their lives and
equal control over when they want to have a baby and when they don't want to start a family. I think Planned Parenthood is a very apt name because the alternative is unplanned parenthood. And we know that most pregnancies in the United States, to even couples who have lots of children and have been married for a long time, they're unplanned. And I don't want to live in a world where unplanned parenthood is the majority of parenthood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Pretty common sense, right? Most
Yeah.
people would probably be on board, do you think?
I think when you put politics into it, people put emotions into it, and things get kind of complex and convoluted. I think when you bring religions that don't advocate for birth control or planned pregnancies, now you have another element of belief that may not comply with scientific research, statistics, and that's their choice. But for me, I don't want an accidental family. I want a planned family. And I'm glad that Planned Parenthood is here to provide those services, and that's why we're supporting them with our art in the community, and that's why I think so many people have come out in Tucson to say, I'll give some money to this. Yeah. I'll drink a beer to this. I mean, I will be drinking a beer to this later.
Right.
Yeah.
Well deserved. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. So one more question. What's next after this? Have you thought that far? Or?
No. No, I really haven't. I'll go back to my biotech job and continue to do that. And this surprisingly is my weekend and after work hobby for advocacy for reproductive health choices because I feel strongly about that as a scientist and as a community member, that we continue, no matter what our background, what our level of income is, to have access to those things. That's important to me. Yeah.